Welcome to Schweitzer Drive, a podcast where we explore what goes on between the generation of electricity and the light switch. Join Dave Whitehead as he interviews the entrepreneurs, innovators, and experts who are inventing the future of electric power.
Hi, I'm Dave Whitehead, CEO at Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories, and today I'm going to be talking with David Dozalik, Principal Engineer at SEL. David joined SEL in 1996 and has worked in R&D, engineering services, sales, and customer service. He's developed and implemented innovative solutions to intricate power system challenges and teaches numerous topics as an adjunct professor. David is a patented inventor and has authored dozens of technical papers and continues to research first principles of mission-critical technology. With 3 decades of experience in electric power protection, automation, communication, and control, over the years, David has worked on so many cool technical projects around the world that have solved intricate power system challenges. But today, I want to discuss the impact of projects that make electric power available to parts of the world for the first time. In a number of cases, he's helped to bring power to communities who did not have it before. David, thank you for joining us today.
Of course, happy to be here with you.
Before we launch into the projects, let's set the stage. In the U.S., we are very fortunate to have access to reliable and, for the most part, affordable electricity. But that is not the case for many folks around the world. Can you talk about the impact of having access to safe, reliable, and economical power and what it means to not have it?
Of course, Dave. You might remember that, I guess it's 20 years ago now, that rural electrification was chosen as the greatest engineering achievement of the last century. That meant a lot to me growing up because I grew up as a farm kid in Montana, and the first farmhouse we had didn't have electricity. And so we actually lived in a town nearby, and my dad drove to the farm every day. And for us, it was actually a fun adventure. It wasn't a challenge. It was an adventure. We'd go visit the farm that was homesteaded by my grandfather, and I'd get to go out and get drinking water outside using a hand-powered pitcher pump, and we got to use the outhouse with a crescent moon in the door. And so it was an adventure because we got to go home every night. But later we moved to a smaller farm with electric power but manual irrigation. So when I went to college and wasn't around anymore to man the shovel and do the irrigation, my dad put in automatic center pivots with electric pumps and motors. So I was literally replaced by electric power. But I can remember sometimes the geese flying along the Missouri River would make contact with the power lines and short them out. Sometimes pelicans would hit them and just tear them out altogether. And then we'd be without power on the farm and we couldn't irrigate. Now, this would only last hours or days, and we always knew it would be restored. So it wasn't really affected. But the first time I truly recognized the impact of providing electric power to those without it was during a wonderful visit to Brazil in 2007. After Ricardo Abud, who's a principal engineer from the SEL Brazil, and I worked with some of the many SEL customers served by that office, I joined Ed and Beatrice Schweitzer at a conference where the Brazilian SEGRE committee chairman thanked SEL and others in attendance for helping to modernize the grid and help to expand electric power service. He then related a story of visiting villagers that had just received electric power for the first times in their home, and one gentleman had personally thanked him for the improvements that electric power had brought to the village, and he told this cool story of their first night with power in their home. He said his wife got out of bed in the darkness and turned on the light and stood in the doorway. After a time, she returned to bed, only to get up again and turn on the light, stand there for a time, before again returning to bed. And when she got up the third time, he said, I told her, you don't have to worry. You don't have to keep checking because the electric power should be there whenever you want it. And she turned to him and said, no, it's not that at all. It's just that I've never been able to turn on the light at night and see that our children are safe. They're so beautiful, and it's wonderful to watch them sleep. And that story still resonates with me today. And then a few years later, as you know, I had the fun experience with my son Pete when we traveled together to visit rural Tanzania before we climbed Mount Kilimanjaro.
You know, I remember you sending some pictures and some other things while you were out with Pete. Can you tell me a little bit more about the Tanzania, your Tanzania experience?
Yeah, we had been invited to visit the village of Tarakia in the foothills of Kilimanjaro, and they suggested we could visit some of the rural schools where we were actually encouraged to teach. And so while Pete was planning a sustainable gardening project, I decided to ask if I could teach my passion, which is energy and electric power. And they said, well, that's great, but just so you know, the schools don't have any electric power and none of the kids have electric power at home. And so my first challenge was to create a curriculum for students without electric power in their homes or at school. And it was really fun and rewarding. My preparation, though, I started to realize just how inaccurate some of the available materials for children are, and that they mostly teach the consequences of having electric power, like don't put a knife in the toaster and stuff like that, and not really its source. So it was fun to find ways to teach electric power with simple hands-on demonstrations for which all the materials could be sourced in parts of the world that don't have electric power. So Pete and I also brought a couple of small solar power plants for the schools in our luggage. And when we connected the solar panels and the schools had electric light and power for the first time, the kids were just delighted and they were really excited to learn more. But I do have to say that even without electric power, it was obvious that their scientific education was fantastic. We had a great time. But I also remember as we traveled around the village, I realized that the light from my phone, which was a BlackBerry at the time, was more electric light than the entire village, even without a flashlight app back in those days. So sometime later, after we got home, Charles, the principal of one of the schools, wrote to me to say that kids were very thankful, motivated, and they wanted to connect the village to the TANESCO electric grid. They enjoyed the light in the school so much that they wanted more access to electric power. And they had staged a fundraiser but fell short. So long story short, my wife Karen and I worked with an NGO and people of the Palouse area to raise some money to invest in Tanzania. Now, I treated it like an engineering project, and I very carefully started by learning from the people I met in Tarakia what's most important, what would work best, what would last a long time, be easy to take care of, and make the most improvements. And so we focused on access to clean water and electric power. Since then, it's been real rewarding to watch the village change as the grid was extended to the schools and the health clinic so that they, and actually the villagers near each new distribution pole, could receive electric service for the first time. We even wrote a booklet in Kiswahili to teach the fundamentals of electric power to the youngsters. Another change over the past decade is that since then, many villagers now have their own mobile phones that they use for everything. They can find work, they do their banking, they take care of each other, but without power at home, they have to find a place to charge their phone, and they often use the charging stations that we set up. We even helped deliver a wood cook stove that runs an onboard thermoelectric power plant that powers a small fan to optimize the flame and dramatically reduce the toxic fumes. So those changes were fun, but again, as an engineer, what I was really interested in was the effects. And so I was excited 18 months after the grid extension that we learned firsthand the lasting impact from the results of a Rotary International audit. The project included 2 miles of electric power lines, and since the groundwater is so deep at the foothills of Kilimanjaro, wells are not successful. So we actually built 5 rainwater harvesting systems and storage tanks for clean water. In those first 18 months alone, over 3,000 people had improved access to drinking water. Over 4,500 people had improved access to health care. Over 900 children began receiving health care for the very first time. And the child under 5 mortality rate, which I'd never even thought about before, was forever changed when well over 400 children survived and are living today because of those changes. So actually, I returned to Tanzania every few years to teach in those area schools. And the trip I made with my wife, Karen, in the year 2020 turned out to be quite a bit different, thanks to help from many friends here at SEL. Nels Chick in marketing and Mark Street in PC Help spent a weekend helping me to digitize my Blackboard and hands-on curriculum so I could load it, and other materials onto some iPads that were donated with the help of Phyllis Stevens in IT. Then Levi Delson in IT helped with a donated laptop for the health clinic and a data projector for the schools. So this time, I still taught the kids in remote Tanzania how to find things, to fashion a steam turbine from an old soda can, a candle, and some string, and an electric generator from a cardboard tube, some wire and magnets, and an old pencil. But with the donations and support from SEL, I was able to teach with iPads, videos, and PowerPoint projected on the walls of the same classroom where I first taught years ago with just chalk on the walls before the school had electric power. You know, Dave, energy is the currency of life, and electric energy is the currency of all human civilization. And it's just amazing how it makes every life better every day.
You know, David, those things are so impactful when you think about it. You know, when was the last time? Certainly in the U.S., we were concerned about the lack of electricity and the impact it might have on the life of a young child. As you mentioned earlier, there are lots of parts of the world without access to electricity. And you've certainly, probably out of anybody at SEL, have had the opportunity to travel around the world to bring electricity to others. I know you worked pretty close with Carlos K. Khan, who was the VP of International Sales a while ago, to do that. Do you have any other stories, kind of like the one you just told us? Every one of these almost makes me cry, you know, with the impact that it has on folks. But how about sharing another one? I haven't cried enough yet today.
All right, Dave. I'm very fortunate. I'm available or able to do travel and help people because of the work I have with SEL and earn a good living and feel good about the contribution here. But in my professional life as well, I did get to do a lot of really cool things with Carlos. He gave me the opportunity to do projects in a lot of parts of the world, but one of the things he asked me to do was to work with the World Bank. And at the World Bank, we contributed our efforts and our engineering pro bono, because we're not trying to influence sales or anything. We're just teaching. And we were actually teaching them to help people ask for appropriate technology and design the best technology possible. And it was there that I learned of the direct correlation between the availability of electric power and a reduction in everything, including the child under 5 mortality rate that I learned about in Tarakia. In the world today, there are about 1 billion people who live without electricity and hundreds of millions more who live without insufficient or unreliable access to it. Nearly 3 billion people cook or heat their homes with polluting fuels like wood or other biomass, resulting in indoor and outdoor air pollution that cause widespread health impacts. And so the World Bank uses this single number, the Human Development Index, or HDI, as one efficient measure of the average quality of life of the citizens of each country. And the HDI is a composite indicator of economic wealth, education, and the health of the average citizen. So, for example, citizens of very developed countries with a high HDI can actually expect to live 19 years longer and spend 7 more years in school. So the HDI is used to help identify developing countries as targets for investment in order to combat the negative effects of those huge differences among the countries. USAID and the World Bank developed the Investor Roadmap, which became a popular tool for monitoring the business environments of developing countries. And I'm proud to say that I've worked in many substations around the world with USAID stickers on the front of SEL relays. And so we're fortunate. SEL is a true crossover company because we're involved in both the economic and technical prosperity of developing countries. And at their request, we helped write the World Bank's technical roadmap for practical power system modernization investments. It's a book that they share with people around the world that are looking to improve their power systems. It has a lot of great technical resources. Kwawu Gaba at the World Bank taught me, while we were working on this, that the only consistent and reliable metric for the well-being of a country's citizens is the average amount of electric power used by the average citizen, or the per capita electric power consumption. He said that countries chosen for investment have a per capita annual consumption under 4,000 kilowatt hours. And today, our friends in Tanzania average only 95 kilowatt hours. And friends from Ghana are down at 341, while you and I and others in the U.S. average over 12,000 kilowatt hours. So, making electric power more available to villagers has a direct impact on everything, including the under 5 child mortality rate that's 14 to 20 times higher in low energy countries than in energy affluent countries. And we have direct evidence to prove it. And there's so many other benefits, and I could go on forever, but that fact stuck with me. At one point, I had to ask, isn't increased access to electric power just a proxy for increased wealth? And we learned that the answer is no. Electric power stimulates faster economic growth and enhanced social development. Electric energy is truly the key to improvement of the Human Development Index.
Yeah, the impacts of not having electricity certainly are daunting. Robert Bryce produced a documentary called Juice, How Electricity Explains the World. Robert does an excellent job of explaining how the lack of electricity, while it may not cause poverty, if you don't have electricity, will certainly keep that country or that region in an impoverished state. And it's really worth watching if you haven't taken a look at it. And there's a link to it on our website. If you're curious where you can maybe find out where it's at. I think those of us who work in the industry get how important electricity is. And then in Ghana is another country that is working to expand access to reliable power. You've worked on that project, and how did the first project start?
Right, Dave. I did see that documentary. I find him fascinating. A lot of cool details in there. And you're right, he does a really good job of expressing the impact of lack of energy. So if you don't see it firsthand, the documentary is really good at sharing the reality of it. We've done several projects in Ghana, but the one I wanted to talk about most started back in 2011. And I love this story because it touches on every part of our company and how teaching is selling in so many different ways. Teaching is helping. It started with a sales rep in Chicago, A-Star, found an opportunity to collaborate with us and companies Mead Electric and Weldy Lamont, who are working on a new substation way over in Ghana. And so the substation is near the town of Kintampo in central Ghana. And they were building a new 400 megawatt hydroelectric power plant, and they expected it to be completed in 2013. So they were working on designing the substation. A-Star taught Mead Electric and Weldy Lamont that SEL is a fantastic technical solution partner. At the time, Ghana was experiencing severe electricity supply challenges. Back in 1989, the National Electrification Scheme had been created to extend electricity to all parts of the country over a 30-year period. At the time back then, electrification access was about 25% and rural coverage was less than 5%. So Ghana also instituted a self-help electrification plan called SHEP to encourage communities to support the government's effort of extending the electricity to all and to accelerate the extension of the grid to these rural communities. And these communities stepped up and they were willing to buy and erect all the distribution poles required for the local network and show that at least 1/3 of the houses in the community were already wired and ready to go to receive electric supply in order to get connected to the grid. And so they tackled the problem from both ends. In 2011, 62% of the population was receiving electric power. And even though the remaining rural areas were very difficult, I read today that they're well over 83%. So a large part of that was because of the Kintampo substation, which was the project in the works when they visited Pullman. So as part of their due diligence, Gridco was evaluating potential solution providers, SEL, and they visited Pullman. R&D, SNCS, quality and manufacturing met with them for an SEL company audit late in June of 2011. And back then, Weldy Lamont and Mead Electric and A-Star all joined them in Pullman. And Yusuf Botza and Chris Klippinger from the Engineering Services Group in Charlotte flew out to meet with them as well. And the visit was a great success. And then later, our SEL International group, Tim Tibbles, Fernando Calero, and myself held a technical seminar with Gridco in their offices in Accra, Ghana.
So West Africa is not very close to Pullman, Washington, probably halfway around the world. And I know there's an interesting story about going from Pullman to West Africa, or in particular to the capital of Ghana. Would you share that with us?
Yeah, Dave, that was a really fun, exciting, and worthwhile trip. And it was actually just good business. The International Technology Group, along with Rich Tollison and Sean Poole from the Video Marketing Group, had traveled to Europe and Africa with the pilots Mark Ray and Brian Hemingway on one of the SEL Citation 10s. We had so many people going, it made sense to take the aircraft. And then we got to visit all these different places in this one trip. It's so much more work accomplished than trying to do this all commercial. And we started at an important technical meeting in France where we tested the interoperability of many of our products with other IEC 61850 suppliers. As you know, that's a group of protocols that are standardized so that products from different companies can talk to each other, and international customers and now North American customers like that it's a standard that all the manufacturers support. Anyway, since we were flying, we were able to fill the luggage compartment full of relays and clocks and icon multiplexers and all kinds of things that we took, and we showed up in France with all this equipment. So we were able to teach a bunch of people there. There were customers and competitors there. We could teach them about products, and we actually learned a lot too because we had enough products to connect and prove interoperability and do a lot of testing. We learned about communications, multiplexing, and so forth. So while that was going on, because I had a plane at our disposal, we flew down to Madrid for a technical meeting with our longtime customer, Red Electrica. And Rich and Sean filmed one of the great case study videos. It's on our website while we were there, because that customer was really receptive and helpful in sharing their story and success and making electric power safer, more reliable, and more economical. And we started discussions that led to a really cool technical solution a few years later, but that project's a whole podcast on its own.
Yeah, I do remember that project. As I recall, it was a high voltage DC power link through the Pyrenees. But if we get back to Africa, how did you guys end up getting from Spain to Ghana?
Right. So we finished the meeting in Spain, flew back up to France, finished the work in France, and then we had arranged to go visit our office in Centurion, South Africa. So we flew the aircraft into South Africa. We had a bunch of technical meetings there with Dion. And
hey, Dave, real quick, how long is that flight from Europe down to the tip of Africa?
What's fun is I'm not sure how long it took, but we made it a 2-day trip. We had to stop for gas. So since we were stopping, we said we might as well stop somewhere awesome. So we stopped in Mallorca, Spain for the night. And it's a vacation destination, but it had a gas station. So it was fantastic. It was a fun way to blow off some steam. We were working pretty long hours. And so it was a 2-day trip down there. So that hop was interesting. I think we stopped in Cameroon and Mallorca on the way to Johannesburg. And in Johannesburg, we did a bunch of meetings. We have a lot of great customers there too, a lot of loyal customers, and had some really good visits. And then we were headed to Namibia next to film another one of the cool case studies. And Rich and Sean were visiting with people from the office and people from our partner office, the technical partner Conco, that were involved in creating these really cool SEL 61850 systems in Namibia. And so after our visit to South Africa, we flew to Namibia, met people from NamPower there, had another technical meeting with them in rural Namibia. And then they were really gracious and took us to visit several of the substations that they had just modernized. You might remember that one of the substations served a huge uranium mine, and the other served a large desalination plant on the coast. It's a skeleton coast, actually, that provides fresh water for the local population and also fed fresh water to the mine itself. And so while we were there, we were traveling with Mark and Brian and had a corporate jet being used as a tool for business, meant that we could make changes. We'd already done more work than we expected. We'd stayed longer for all these technical discussions and had a lot of really rewarding engineering discussions and discussed cool future solutions. And I wanted to see if we could add one more visit on the trip home. So just like making multiple stops on the way to South Africa, we knew we were going to have to stop on the way home. So Tim had been in the Pullman Gridco meeting when the people from Ghana were in Pullman. So he called Chris Clippinger, who was working on the project, and arranged for us to give a technical seminar to Gridco in Ghana on the way home. And we met with Gridco, Weldy Lamont, Mead Electric at the Accra, Ghana office, which was on the way home, if you look at the map. And it was really fun. They were really excited. We had great technical discussions, and they treated us to a wonderful social visit. And as I was leaving, I still remember, he says, nobody's ever bothered to come to Ghana and visit with us before. He says, if nothing else happens, that is so meaningful to us, and I wanted to thank you for that. And it's just another one of those conversations that you never forget. So anyway, all of those meetings and the ones in Pullman and so forth led to us working on that substation near Kantampo that on its first day in service electrified 32 villages for the very first time.
Wow, that is so cool. Those folks able to have electricity for the first time, and you're right. The corporate aviation is like a big cargo van, if you will, where you can haul a bunch of stuff around and be close and quickly be with your customers or the folks that really need your help. So it sounds like that resulted in some very good meetings. The part I always struggle with, everybody can have a good meeting, but what do you do after that? Can you walk us through how you went from those meetings to actually building a solution that ends up electrifying 32 more villages for the first time?
Right. And again, that's fun because so many people have been involved already, right? To support the visit to Pullman, to support the rep and Mead Electric and Weldy Lamont, and to help us drop in and visit with Gridco. And so the next was working with Charles Anderson at Mead Electric. He'd created this great project design and a substation automation system that was all blue based on 6150. And the Charlotte engineering office kicked into high gear and started designing the protection and communication system settings, identified all the electronic devices that were necessary. So, of course, those were built here in Pullman. Those electronic devices that sit now in Ghana were made by all our friends right here in Pullman, Washington. That always just blows my mind. And then those were shipped to Mexico facility where the panels were designed and built. And then they shipped the panels to the SEL Charlotte office because the engineering team in Charlotte actually staged the whole system, configured it, made sure it was all working correctly in the lab. And then they hosted engineers from Ghana to come over, and they had a very successful factory acceptance test. They put the system through its paces. They made sure it was going to do everything they wanted before it ever got installed. So next, the panels were sent by ship to West Africa, where they were delivered to the Kantampo substation. Then Yusuf Botza and some other SEL engineers from the Charlotte office traveled over there and joined Gridco, Weldy Lamont, and Mead Electric engineers to commission the site. And the relays were in the panels in the prefabricated control house. And some SEL intelligent merging units were installed in field kiosks and mounted out into the substation. And those were built in Mexico. And when they were installed, they reduced the wiring and commissioning time a great deal because they converted a lot of the wiring and the digital information that came into the control building over fiber optic cables and communication messages instead of copper wire. And today, that substation serves several hundred villages that had never before had electric power. It's gone from 32 that first day to well over 300 today. Also, as you know, SEL builds technical support offices when we start serving a new region of the globe. And Fred Ankar from our Ghana office learned from Yusuf that there was a young Gridco intern named Kwasi Apoku, and he was very helpful during the commissioning. And so actually we later hired him into SEL Ghana, and I just recently learned that he's actually moved to the USA to pursue a PhD.
Wow, that is that's really cool. Not only you turning lights on in a village, but you're changing somebody's life by having them come to the U.S. and getting an advanced degree. Seems like those projects had a bunch of SEL product and solutions along with our partners too. It's almost like a turnkey solution.
Yeah, that's what I like about being a solutions company. I mean, we spec, design, build, test, install, commission, support, teach, and then start all over again. This particular one goes back further than 2011, though, because Back in 2008, Yusuf had done a senior design project as a student at the University of North Carolina on IEC 61850 communications, and he'd collaborated with several people on a conference technical paper. Then after the success of the substation, we collaborated on another paper in early 2013 after he'd become an SEL engineer about the Contampo system. And I can tell you, I've met with many customers that have used that specific paper as a design resource for Ethernet and IEC 61850. But also, since 61850 was new to the Gridco engineers, we actually developed a custom SELU class for their system. And SELU hosted them, a team of Gridco engineers in Pullman, for a week of engineering training that I taught in October of 2013. So everybody's involved, and that's even before the power ships.
So I've heard of power ships from Turkey. What is their connection? And more importantly, what is a power ship for folks that may not know exactly what they are?
Right. They are pretty awesome. So if you watch the documentary, you'll see that power ships are fully functional ship-mounted floating power plants. This company in Turkey often takes old ships and converts them into floating power plants. They're built in Turkey, and they're ready to generate power as soon as they arrive at their destination. Power is fed directly into the transmission network on shore from the onboard high voltage substation. So our technical partners at Foray Electric in Istanbul has been working on protection and control schemes for these mobile power plants for over 10 years. And Dave and his team have installed SEL relays, computers, Ethernet switches in over 20 power ship projects ranging from 40 megawatts to over 500 megawatts. In fact, this month, I was just talking to Dave. His team is commissioning SEL protection control devices in substations on 3 ships in Senegal, Gambia, and Guinea-Bissau. So those are pretty remote places where SEL relays are being commissioned just this month. But back in 2011, while the new hydro plant was being built for central Ghana, the port town of Tema, near the capital, was also had unstable electric service. And over the years, they recognized problems that the fishing industry was suffering due to persistent and unpredictable power outages, which made things difficult due to lack of ice and refrigeration. And it wasn't uncommon for vendors, fishmongers, ice makers, and everyone else to be without power for 48 hours at a time. So like the power ship full of SEL relays that you saw traveling to Lebanon in the documentary Juiced, Ghana improved their grid from the east because we're working in central Ghana at Contampo already. They did this in 2015 by bringing the semi-submersible car power ship. It connects from a position in the port of Tema and feeds the grid from natural gas-fired generators. It's since been joined by a second power ship, and honestly, there's so many numerous SEL solutions on sea and on land helping to make electric power safer, more reliable, and more economical in Ghana.
Dave, just talking to you, you can see that to get the lights on in a village, it takes certainly more than just one company. It takes engineering firms, it takes international partners, it takes willing governments, it takes, I won't say desperate customers, but certainly customers who would really like to have lights turned on in their part of the world. What are your thoughts?
Dave, what I love about our mission is that it's active. In addition to our support office in Accra, we continue to do projects in Ghana to this day even. Isaac and our services team in Spain did additional work in Contampo in 2016 and 2 other substations in 2017 and 19 to further enhance the Ghana electric system. I learned a really cool fact a while ago while visiting with William Amuna. He was the CEO of Gridco until 2017. And he has a lot of great experience and examples of the impact of this grid extension work in Ghana. He's retired now, but his son Fred is an SEL project engineer in the Charlotte office, and his son Andrew was recently an SEL intern, but is now moving to Pullman to join the SEL engineering rotation program. Fred told me that his dad often sends him photos of SEL relays that he comes across while he's traveling around Ghana. So it's funny, like you and I, SEL has become a family tradition for some of our customers as well. Recently, Mr. Amuna also wrote to tell me that the work by Gridco has improved the power system in Ghana so much that they now export power to Burkina Faso and Togo, and they're helping them to employ strategies to increase residential access. As he says, new access to electricity also attracts industry and investment that creates employment and thereby further improves the standards of living for people. He also told me about the day the town of Siani-Wa was finally connected to the grid. And in this case, the entire town stayed up all night celebrating with every single light turned on. No one slept, and the villagers said, "Electricity is life. It brings happiness." If you have enjoyed electricity from birth, you may not value it as much, but it makes an enormous difference to us. Availability of electricity provides jobs, it gives hope, and indeed it brings smiles to the faces of the people when they receive it.
That's a cool story, right? You think of the world as a really, really big place, but in reality, maybe it's not that big. So, Dave, I love hearing about all these stories. You know, it's always fun, you know, maybe even just grabbing a beer and sitting around and telling all these things. Certainly, it's fun to share with others what's going on in the world and how, though we may build some of these electronic devices here in Pullman, the impact that they have on folks around the world is truly life-altering, right? When people can have light at night so that girls can read books and study and go to school, that is what lifts everybody up. So thank you very much for sharing your stories.
You bet, Dave. I was going to say, like most things, I've recognized we don't recognize the impact of electric power until we don't have it. Even something as simple as a low battery on our telephone. And so I've seen firsthand how the access to electricity changes lives, and I'm really proud to work with you and others because we regularly make that happen. It's a really great feeling.
Yeah, it's not just a job, right? It's a privilege.
That's right.
All right.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, David. Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you for stopping by Schweitzer Drive. Join us again as we learn about, explore, and celebrate electric power. For more information about the show, please visit selinc.com/Schweitzer Drive.